The morning sun beamed through the tall windows of Studio 6A at Rockefeller Center, bouncing off polished floors and shimmering across the glossy Today with Jenna and Friends logo. The air inside buzzed with anticipation. Producers rushed across the set with clipboards, stylists made last-minute touch-ups, and audience members chattered with excitement. It wasn't every day that a living legend like Reba McEntire, the queen of country music herself, sat down for a live morning show appearance. For decades, Reba had been a household name. Her fiery red hair, quick wit, and unmistakable Southern charm had made her a force in entertainment. From chart-topping hits to television roles, she'd done it all. This interview was supposed to be a lighthearted celebration of her new album and her recent run on The Voice. But in television, one wrong question could turn a calm morning into chaos, and that's exactly what happened. Jenna Bush Hager, bright and cheerful as ever, welcomed Reba with her usual warmth. "Reba McEntire, we're so thrilled to have you here," she said as the crowd applauded wildly. Reba smiled and waved. "Well, thank you kindly, Jenna. Always good to be here with y'all," she said in her smooth Oklahoma drawl. The first few minutes flowed perfectly. They talked about Reba's music, her time mentoring young artists, and her upcoming tour. Laughter filled the room as Reba shared a funny story about accidentally losing her boots before a concert. Jenna and her co-host giggled, and the audience loved every second of it. But then came the moment that changed everything. Jenna, smiling innocently, glanced at her notes and asked, "Reba, there have been a few reports lately that things behind the scenes on The Voice haven't been all sunshine, maybe a little tension with other coaches. Is there any truth to that?" The audience fell silent. Reba's smile froze, the corners of her lips tightening. She blinked once, twice, and leaned back in her chair. "Tension," she repeated slowly. "Now, where'd you hear that, sugar?" Jenna laughed nervously. "Oh, you know how the internet can be. We just wanted to give you the chance to clear the air." Reba's expression hardened. "Well, that's mighty thoughtful of you," she said, her voice calm but edged. "But I've learned not to feed gossip. It grows faster than weeds after a rainstorm." The crowd chuckled, but Reba wasn't done. "Truth is, folks love to stir up drama where there isn't any. Keeps 'em busy, I suppose." Sensing the tension, Jenna tried to lighten the mood. "I totally get that, but we love a little behind-the-scenes scoop, don't we?" she said with a half-smile. Reba shot her a sharp look. "Behind-the-scenes scoop, huh? That's another word for trouble, honey." A hush fell over the set. The co-host shifted awkwardly, glancing toward the producer's booth. Jenna's cheerful tone faltered. "Reba, I think you might be misunderstanding me," she said carefully. Reba leaned forward. "No, I don't think I am. You're sittin' here smilin', talkin' sweet, but askin' a question meant to get people talkin'. That's not friendly conversation, that's bait." The audience gasped. Jenna's eyes widened. "Reba, I promise all you want, but I know the game," Reba interrupted, her voice calm but cutting. "I've been in this business long enough to know when someone's looking for a sound bite." Jenna tried to recover. "We just admire your honesty." "Then ask me an honest question," Reba shot back. "Ask me about my music. Ask me about the young artists I'm helping. But don't ask me about gossip that doesn't matter." The air in the studio grew heavy. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even the cameraman hesitated, unsure whether to zoom in or pull back. Reba crossed her arms, her eyes steady on Jenna, who now looked visibly flustered. "I really didn't mean any disrespect," Jenna said softly. Reba's tone softened slightly, but her disappointment lingered. "I know, honey, but sometimes disrespect doesn't come from what you mean, it comes from what you say without thinking." The crowd murmured. A producer signaled from behind the cameras, but it was too late, the energy had completely changed. Reba unclipped her microphone and stood up. "Well, I think that's enough talk for me today," she said, forcing a polite smile. "Y'all have a good show." Jenna's co-host tried to intervene. "Reba, please, we'd love for you to stay." But Reba shook her head. "When the questions stop being about music, that's my cue to leave." And with that, she turned and walked off stage, her red hair swaying like a flame. The audience gasped, a few clapping awkwardly while others whispered in disbelief. The camera caught Jenna's stunned expression just before the show abruptly cut to a commercial break. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Producers scrambled to contain the damage. "Did she really just walk out?" One whispered. "She's gone," another replied. "She left the building." Jenna sat frozen in her chair, microphone still in hand, her face pale with shock. I didn't mean to upset her, she murmured. But by then, Reba was already in the hallway, her boots clicking against the tile floor as she made her exit, her legendary poise intact, her pride unshaken, and her silence louder than any song she'd ever sung. By the time the Today with Jenna and Friends broadcast returned from commercial, the entire studio was in disarray. Jenna Bush Hager, normally radiant and composed, sat before the camera with a faintly forced smile. Her co-host nervously tried to steer the segment elsewhere, but the air was thick with awkward silence. Viewers across the nation already knew something major had just happened, and they were hungry for answers. 15 minutes later, the internet exploded. Within moments, hashtags like #Reba walks out, #Reba vs Jenna, and #Respect Reba began trending across X, formerly Twitter. TikTok clips showing the exact moment Reba rose from her chair flooded every feed. "She handled that like a queen," one user wrote. Another commented, "You don't play games with Reba McEntire, she is the game." Inside NBC's backstage corridors, the atmosphere was chaos. Producers paced the hallway, phones pressed to their ears, trying to calm both Reba's management and network executives demanding an explanation. Jenna, visibly shaken, sat in her dressing room with her hands clasped together, replaying the moment over and over in her mind. "I didn't mean to push her," she whispered to a senior producer. "It was supposed to be a fun question." The producer sighed, rubbing his temples. "Jenna, I know, but live TV doesn't forgive. Reba's team is furious, they're saying you ambushed her." Meanwhile, in another corner of the building, Reba sat quietly in her own dressing room. The atmosphere there was tense but controlled. Her assistant had already handed her phone to her. Hundreds of messages from fans, journalists, and fellow artists were pouring in. "You're trending everywhere," her publicist said, scrolling through the flood of mentions. "You walked out 15 minutes ago, and people are calling you iconic." Reba didn't smile. She took a sip of her coffee, still hot, and said calmly, "I didn't walk out to make a statement. I walked out because respect matters. Always has, always will." Her publicist nodded, but before he could reply, there was a knock at the door. Standing there was an NBC executive, face pale and nervous. "Reba," he began softly, "we want to thank you for being here today. However, given what happened on air, we think it's best if we cancel the rest of your planned segments." Reba's brows lifted. "Cancel? You're kicking me off your own show." The man hesitated. "It's not that we want to. It's just, things have gotten complicated." Reba set her coffee down. "Complicated for who, exactly? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say anything false. I just refused to play along with gossip." He swallowed hard. "It's just network policy. We don't want to escalate this any further." Reba let out a dry laugh. "Oh, honey, it already escalated the moment y'all tried to twist a simple question into something ugly. You want to protect your image, fine. But don't do it at my expense." She stood up, grabbed her denim jacket, and threw it over her shoulders. "Tell Jenna I wish her well. She's young. Maybe someday she'll understand that respect isn't just about smiling pretty for the cameras." And with that, she walked out. As she stepped into the lobby, paparazzi and reporters swarmed like bees around Honey. Flashbulbs burst in her face, microphones shot toward her. "Reba, what happened inside?" One shouted. "Did Jenna insult you?" Another yelled. Reba stopped mid-stride, her boots clicking against the marble floor. She turned toward the cameras, her green eyes steady. "What happened?" she said clearly. "I stood up for myself. And if that gets me kicked off TV, then so be it." Then she climbed into a waiting black SUV, door slamming softly behind her, and the legend was gone. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Entertainment sites plastered the clip across their homepages with sensational headlines. "Reba McEntire walks out on live TV." "Country queen clashes with Jenna Bush Hager." Even mainstream news outlets picked it up, debating whether Reba had overreacted or whether Jenna's question had crossed a line. Fans were divided, but the majority sided with Reba. "She's old school," one tweet read. "She doesn't do fake drama. That's why we love her." The hashtag stand with Reba reached over 1 million posts before noon. By early afternoon, NBC released a short statement. "We deeply respect Reba McEntire and regret that today's interview did not go as planned. We wish her continued success and hope to welcome her back in the future." But that wasn't enough for the fans. They demanded a public apology from Jenna herself. The next morning, Jenna returned to her show with noticeably puffy eyes. The atmosphere was solemn. Yesterday's interview with Reba McEntire didn't go the way any of us expected, she began softly, her voice trembling slightly. I asked a question that upset her, and I want to say from my heart, I'm sorry. I've always admired Reba and never meant to disrespect her. I hope she knows that. The audience offered polite applause, but the apology did little to stop the storm online. Clips of her apology were met with mixed reactions, some praised her humility, while others accused her of trying to save face. That night, Reba finally broke her silence. On her Instagram, she posted a single photo, a close-up of her guitar resting on a stool, under a spotlight. The caption read simply, "Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you show." Heart. Within minutes, the post went viral. Celebrities, musicians, and fans flooded the comments with support. Country artists from every generation reposted her message, calling it a masterclass in dignity. Reba didn't address the incident again. She didn't need to. The moment had already become part of her legend, a reminder that even in a world obsessed with sound bites and viral clips, authenticity still had power. And somewhere in the heart of Nashville that night, the queen of country leaned back in her chair, strummed her guitar softly, and smiled. She'd walked off a show, but walked right into history.